Yo, what's up, Montana? Colter Nuanez. It's Nuanez Now coming your way here on this Wednesday. Appreciate you for hanging out. Plenty of stuff to get to. We'll lead the show with our good friend Sam Herder. He certainly has news. I can't say he's of Hero Sports anymore, and we'll leave it at that for now. Sam will explain all the things that he potentially has on the docket, so hopefully he can get things straightened out. But you can always find Sam here during the 4 o'clock hour on Nuanez Now. You can also find the Mondak Football Show coming up on Friday. We will debut that here on ESPN Radio. You can also find him on various other podcast channels that we have as well. So appreciate Sam for taking some time here, like he does every single week. We will also hear from Justin Lamson, the quarterback for the Montana State Bobcats. We'll hear Reese Brooks, new tight end for the Montana Grizzlies, and we'll have a special ESPN roundtable. Some storytelling with our good friend Ryan Tutel, who's now back in the fold on Tutel Nuanez. He and I debuted this roundtable earlier today, and thought it was a good time to replay it to sort of talk about Ryan's journey from, a philosophy major to a Montana Sportscaster of the Year to a vagabond on a cross-country road trip with his whole family to a homeschooling dad to a cross-country truck driver to various other jobs along the way, and now back in the seat with us here at ESPN Radio. So that should be a fun interview. Plenty of laughs coming your way in that one as well. By the way, Justin Lamson coming up about 4:45. Reese Brooks coming up about 5:30. And Sam Herder will get us kicked off here on the show today. If you want to stream it, you always can, 1029ESPN.com. You can also find us on the ESPN MT app. You can also find us on Facebook and on Twitch. And please, and YouTube as well. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow along on our social medias, particularly our Facebook page where we stream live each and every day here on Nuanez Now. Get things started with one of our favorite guys. The FCS Herd, back for another week. Sam Herder joining us here now on Nuanez Now, 1029 ESPN Radio. You can also find it on the YouTube as well as on our Big Sky Breakdown podcast series. And Sam, we start with, usually we're the ones writing the headlines and writing the stories, but you kind of are a headline at this exact moment. Unfortunately, I shouldn't laugh, but it has been cool to see the outpouring of reactions for all the great work that you've done over these last couple of years. But unfortunately, Hero Sports now not going to be a thing, and you are going under the independent mode. So this is, I think, both at the same time, tragic and exciting for you. But that's sort of the thing that's been shaking up the FCS social media landscape is the news that you are no longer doing Hero Sports. But have no fear. You'll find Sam here multiple times a week, both on this radio show as well as on the Mondak Football Show, which will air on Fridays as well. So looking forward to all of that. But, I mean, give us sort of the ins and outs of all this. This is sort of a bombshell that was dropped earlier this week.
Yeah, it obviously came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I kind of had a feeling it was coming on Friday a couple of times or a couple of days beforehand. But I think in the media landscape, I think you're always kind of prepared for a day like this because you even see, veteran sports writer, sports analyst at ESPN, who's, the mothership, they have layoffs every other year. So you got always kind of in the back of your mind, like what would happen if that day ever came for me? What would I do? And, instantly it's okay. I would probably just start my own independent thing. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, but I end up going with Patreon just because everything is all already set up for you. I don't have to do a whole lot of back end work. So it's been a whirlwind last couple of days. Certainly some highs, some lows, but I think I was telling you off air, it's almost rejuvenating to a certain extent when you kind of branch out and do your own thing. And just cool to see the outreach as well. Sometimes I can see the page view numbers and all that. So I can tangibly see how big Hero Sports was getting, but sometimes when you hear from people in different corners of the country, it kind of reiterates how cool it was to kind of grow that brand. And I heard from head coaches and ADs, commissioners. Pete Thamel tweeted about it, which I thought was pretty wild. And then he texted me as well. That was pretty crazy. So some bad news yesterday, but also after that bad news hit me, and then I announced it. It's kind of been more on the upswing since then.
Well, I for one think this is going to be a blessing in disguise for you. I think you're going to land on your feet in fine fashion. the thing is, I mean, it's a good platform that you had, but you are the brand, man. I mean, you're the guy that's been doing all the reporting and all the writing and providing all the information and making the rounds on radio shows all across the country. So that is all going to continue, I'm sure. So, I mean, I guess tell people how they can still find your stuff, because I'm sure you have big plans with the football season just a couple days away. So give people sort of the layout of what you plan on putting on your Patreon page early on here, and also how they can follow along and how they can support you.
Yeah, probably the easiest way is to just Google Patreon and then Sam Herder Sports is the easiest way to find me. I think the URL is like patreon.com/CW/Sam Herder Sports. I'm still not sure what the CW stands for, but other pages have that as well. But yeah, if you just Google it, should be able to pop up right away for you. And I'll have a new podcast called the FCS Daily Dose, which is a Monday through Friday podcast every single day. And then daily articles as well. Pretty much the same type of content I was doing on Hero Sports will now be on Patreon. Some of it will be free, like my top 25 ballot. I'm not going to put that behind a paywall. And other informational pieces, those will be free. But predictions, analysis, columns, reporting, those will be put behind a paywall. And I tweeted it and I wrote it too. I get people don't like paying for stuff that they're used to getting for free, but it's kind of the route it was kind of the cards that I was dealt. So that's the route I'm going, kind of the independent scene, doing the subscribers, and really cool to see. Every time I get a new paid subscriber, I get an email. So it's kind of cool to see every time one of those notifications pops up on my phone or my computer.
Well, that's awesome. And again, Sam will continue to join us here on the FCS Herd with Sam Herder every Wednesday on Nuanez Now. Also, you can find the Mondak Football Show, which is back now for the fall season. And that's been a podcast that's now going to become a podcast and a radio show, so you can find that. We'll be posting links to the podcast form on our web pages, as well as you'll have the radio version of it here on 102.9 ESPN Radio on Fridays. And anytime the Grizz are at home, we're also going to play it again for you on Saturday. Oh, well, I was going to say Saturday morning, but sometimes the Grizz will be playing at night, so we'll play it as the preceding show to our ESPN College Game Day. So when we have an ESPN College Game Day, you're basically going to get 3 full hours of FCS and Grizz football talk leading up to kickoff. So that'll be very fun, very excited about that, and happy to have Sam as part of our network and contributed here on the show. Okay, enough about you here on Nuanez Now. Let's talk about just the state of affairs right now in the FCS. I asked Samuel Akem this yesterday, but I'll ask you the same thing. How many teams in the FCS do you think this year there are that are actually truly national championship contenders?
Yeah, to me, I think it's 3. And that's a low number, but that's, as we've talked about, that's really been the case for a long time now in the FCS. The last time I truly felt the FCS playoffs was wide open was probably 2014. Since then it's been, NDSU and James Madison versus the field, or maybe South Dakota State was in that mix. And then South Dakota State and Montana State started to come, onto the radar in the early 2020s. And so the FCS, it's been more than 10 years, even before all this realignment, where there was like 6, 7, 8 teams that could all legitimately win the national title. So I think it's 3, Montana State, Montana, South Dakota State. I'm really interested. I think the tier 2 in the FCS is really strong. I kind of consider tier 2 as teams that aren't good enough to win a national title, but are good enough to make it to the quarterfinals and give Montana State, a pretty decent game in the quarterfinals, like a Yale did, where like you never really felt Montana State was going to lose that game, but you're like, this Yale team, like they're kind of giving them a scare a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of teams like that in the FCS this year, like Tarleton State and UC Davis. I'm really high on. I think Illinois State is going to be able to reload decently well, but to me it's just 3. But we saw last year that the Redbirds of Illinois State kind of bucked that trend. That might be more of a one-off than a consistent thing, but hopefully overall there is more parity in the FCS moving forward.
Well, I was going to ask you about that element too, because the Illinois State run last year actually reminded me of how it not, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes used to go down in the FCS. It used to be that a team would get red hot and race all the way to the national title, and that was everybody from Boise State way back in 1980. Montana State had a similar red hot run through the playoffs in 1984 when they won the championship. You think about some of the early, I guess, to mid 2000s runs, like Richmond had a run where they were like an 8-win team during the regular season. And then they got scorching hot and won 4 straight playoff games and beat Montana for the 2008 national title. And even Eastern Washington. I mean, that team was good. That Eastern Washington team in 2010 was good, but they got stomped by Montana State and Bozeman to end up having to share the league title with the Bobcats. And then they got red hot in the playoffs and, surged all the way and won the most recent Big Sky Conference national title until Montana State this last year. So I actually was wondering with Illinois State if maybe that was sort of a resurgence of a trend. Maybe if we could start seeing that again where maybe it's not necessarily about the total body of work. It's about how good are you playing down the stretch. Can you get hot into the playoffs? It remains to be seen, right? I think we still need another example of that to say that that's a returning trend. But Illinois State did remind me of some of those old school runs that we used to see in the FCS before, the domination of North Dakota State rose up and sort of dominated the narrative in the landscape for these last 15 or 16 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like you look at Villanova, I mean, they hosted a semifinal game and they were, I can't remember what seed they were, but they weren't a top 8 seed. And so like all across that side of the bracket, it was just kind of bucking trends. Even Illinois State winning on the road in the semifinals. That was the first time a team had won on the road in the semifinals in several years. So it was kind of interesting because it was like one side was really chalky. Then the other side of the bracket was just total chaos. So yeah, we'll see if it's a trend or not. Things might revert back to the norm this season, but certainly I think if anything, it kind of gave, I don't want to say gave other teams hope, but maybe like a glimmer of hope of like, if that Illinois State team who was pretty middle of the road in the regular season, if they can get hot and put things together, then that could happen to a Tarleton State or a Rhode Island, or for example. That kind of just gives them kind of that glimmer of it doesn't always have to be a Montana school versus a Dakota school deep in the bracket.
Well, and the other thing is the one of the most tried and true things that we know, especially over the last 20 years, is that when the Montana schools or the Dakota schools are at home, it's basically impossible to go on the road and win at those places. That said, it doesn't take 3 or 4 upsets to bust the whole bracket. It just takes doing what is nearly impossible, and that's winning in Fargo or winning in Bozeman or winning in Missoula in the playoffs. But even though it's nearly impossible, it's not impossible. And if you do that, now all of a sudden you reroute the whole bracket, and you honestly make it easier on yourself, like Illinois State did last year. Like, of course, they had to go to Fargo and win. That's the rarest of rare things. I think NDSU only lost a couple of playoff games ever, during their FCS era at home. But when you do, then all of a sudden, like I always say, if you beat the 2 seed, you become the 2 seed. If you beat the 1 seed, you become the 1 seed. Like, that's what Illinois State became. So that certainly boosted them up. So again, it doesn't take 3 or 4 upsets in a row. It maybe just takes the one upset, and then all of a sudden you become on even playing field with the next couple teams that you play.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just getting hot at the right time and then just capturing that lightning in a bottle. And yeah, just the Illinois State upset at NDSU was still just crazy. Just so many different moments. Like Illinois State was down 2 touchdowns with like 6 minutes left. Illinois State had the ball on the goal line, like 4th and goal, and got stopped. And I remember watching that game and be like, all right, it's over. And they still somehow found a way to win that game. And so like, you just need like that, those few things to go your way, those few spurts happen in a game, and all of a sudden you're taking that momentum and you're playing, just totally loose. I mean, Illinois State had nothing to lose the next week when they went to UC Davis, and they just played loose and they won. And then they caught fire, went to Villanova with all the confidence in the world, won there. And then, they were feeling it in Nashville. Their fans were feeling it in Nashville. I feel like Montana State wasn't ready for the level of noise that Illinois State fans were making. And yeah, it's just one of those things where they just capture that lightning in a bottle. And now I think they have a chance to continue that into this upcoming season, just with their overall nucleus that they have coming back. Quarterback will be a big question mark, but even fan base wise, like they've announced multiple like $1 million donations just after the run to the FCS national championship game, where like that's what can happen to you as an FCS program when you make a deep playoff run. All of a sudden it ignites your donor base and your alum. And yeah, they've raised a ton of money, probably a few $1 million since making the national championship game.
Yeah. The the fact that winning is inspiring all of that is fascinating, certainly, and it proves just how much winning can have an impact on your university as a whole. Sam Herder joining us here on Nuanez Now. Have you heard any scuttle, or do you have any insight into who the guy that does come after Tommy Rittenhouse might be? Because I thought Rittenhouse was really good last year. He was really fun to watch. And he's not the only guy they have to replace. Daniel Sopkowitz is trying to make his way with the Houston Texans as well. Houston actually just had a couple of receiver injuries in the preseason, so that might actually help Sopkowitz's case. But do you have any indication or any insight into who might be the next guy under center at Illinois State?
Yeah, it's a two-person battle right now. They did bring in a transfer from USC, Gage Roy. So obviously Power 4 experience, didn't necessarily play or anything, but comes from a solid background there. So they haven't announced a starter just yet. It sounds like it's pretty close. So I'm not exactly sure who that is, who it's going to be, but they'll have a very, very experienced offensive line. They have like 3.5 returning starters coming back. Dawson, the really good running back, he's coming back. Dylan Lord, who had an exceptional national championship game, he's coming back along with Maylander, another wide receiver. So it's like you lose Rittenhouse and you lose Sopkowitz, and I understand why there's probably some doubts about if Illinois State can recapture what they did last year. But I think if quarterback play hits, there's so much around the new starter that it's going to allow him to settle in pretty easily.
Another piece of news out of the Missouri Valley this last week was that Lance Rucker, the potential All-American edge guy for the Fighting Hawks, went down with an injury. How impactful do you think this will be to UND? How important will he be? It doesn't sound like it's season ending. Sounds like he might be back. And if you look at North Dakota's schedule, it's a little bit two-sided. It's very favorable for the first 6 weeks, and then, or maybe even the first 7 weeks, and then sort of a gauntlet where they play all of the best teams in the Missouri Valley in a row. So I guess how much impact could this have on North Dakota, and how badly are they going to try to get him back for that sort of gauntlet stretch run that they have?
It's a tough injury for sure. I thought he was among the preseason favorites to win the Buck Buchanan Award. I mean, he had so many TFLs and sacks last year, tackling machine as well. So very disruptive off the edge, and he no doubt has NFL level skill set. I definitely think Rucker he's on the NFL draft radar, and so you hope it sounds like it's a foot injury. You hope it doesn't linger too long, not only for this season but also just in the pre-draft process. But the schedule does set up nicely. Like you said, their first 7 games, one of them is against Nebraska, but their other 6 are against unranked FCS teams. They still should be able to go 6-0, but their final 5 FCS games, all preseason ranked teams. And so that's really where we're going to find out just how good UND is in those final 5 games. So I think they can kind of steady the ship a little bit. They also have Caden Vig coming back at defensive end. He's a preseason All-American. And I think the Fighting Hawks feel good about their depth at defensive tackle. So it's a massive injury, but they can, I think, sustain it just because the schedule sets up nicely for them.
Well, Cam is always telling me that I'm nothing but an FCS elitist, and I can't argue. So when you and I talk, when he and I talk, we always are talking about the Big Sky Conference and the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and we sometimes meander into a couple other thoughts. Certainly the Ivy League has gotten some run as of late with their playoff eligibility now, and the fact they've had a couple good teams, and of course because they had the crossover with Montana State in the playoffs. But what do you think, or which league do you think has a chance to be maybe that third spot behind the 2 sort of premier leagues right now in the FCS this year?
Yeah, I think it's the UAC. They definitely are rising up. And if you look at some different computer rankings and power rankings, I don't know what the algorithm is or, how they compute those, but some rankings have it the Valley, Big Sky, and then the UAC. And the UAC is closer to the Big Sky than the Big Sky is to the Valley. Now, how exactly do they generate that? I don't know. I disagree with that to a certain extent, but I do think overall it shows that the UAC is probably better than what some people give it credit for. I think Tarleton State is a rising program. It was reported that their athletic budget overall is going to be between like $45 and $50 million this year. The Montana schools are like in the 30-ish $1 million range. And so like, that just shows that they are
low 30s.
Yep. So it shows just how much they are investing. A lot of that comes from the university system. That's the the bonus of being in Texas where football is king. But
Sure.
same thing about Abilene Christian, right? They're in Texas. They have some nice money flowing in. Austin P, they retained their standout quarterback, Chris Parson. So I think they're going to be a solid program. And there's just some like non-conference games that you can look at too, and where like the bottom teams compete pretty well. Like North Alabama almost beats Illinois State last year, and Southern Utah was very, very competitive with UC Davis. I can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago. Maybe they had a home and home. So there's just results out there that you can look at that shows that the UAC is a very strong number 3 conference in the FCS.
Do you think how much do you think the loss of Southern Utah and Utah Tech with those two teams coming to the Big Sky impacts the UAC, if at all?
Yeah, I don't know if it impacts it impacts their scheduling, and I think they're down to, how many members do they have? I think it's down to 7 members right now. And so sometimes when you're losing members like that, you know, some teams can get a little squirrely, about just like the membership and how stable the conference is. And I mean, Tarleton no doubt wants to go to the FBS. And so if you're an Abilene Christian, are you kind of going, what happens if Tarleton leaves? Then like, is the conference on shaky ground? Should we get out now? Like, I'm not saying that's what they're thinking, but sometimes that can be in the back of your minds as your membership starts to decrease. Utah Tech leaving doesn't, matter a whole lot. Just competitively, they're kind of at the bottom of the conference. Southern Utah, I always thought was a really pesky opponent. They were always, the last couple of years, they've been right on the playoff bubble. They've been the type of program where they'll scare the daylights out of a team like Tarleton State, but then they'll also lose to Idaho State, 2 years ago. Sure. So like it's kind of Jekyll and Hyde a little bit with that program. But as they come into the Big Sky, I don't think Utah Tech will move the needle a whole lot. I don't suspect Southern Utah to be in the playoff mix, but I don't have their schedule in front of me. But I think there's going to be a couple of games where they're pushing one of the better Big Sky teams and giving them a scare.
I think that it's funny because people's memories are so brief when it comes to sports, and they're also so singular when it comes to the way that they focus on either their team and the rival of their team. Like that's so often like how it goes in Montana is like people know everything and anything and remember everything and anything about the Grizz and the Cats and each other, and that's about it. It's just so funny because being as we broadcast out of Missoula, I think a lot of people think that Montana's season opener is a total cupcake game. And I don't actually think that's true. I'm not saying Southern Utah is going to come to Missoula and win, but Southern Utah will look like a real Division I team, and I think that they'll certainly offer some resistance to the Grizz. I think people remember I think people forget about how good Southern Utah was at their peak, like 2014 to 2017, when Ed Lamb and Demario Warren were there. But then they sort of remember when it sort of fell off a cliff under Warren under his last couple of years. And then they left the league and nobody really paid attention to them around the Big Sky or around the state of Montana. But they've been sort of quietly solid. I mean, they've gone 7-5 the last 2 years. You mentioned it. I mean, last year they were in the mix with Northern Arizona. They lost by a field goal. They ended up losing by 2 touchdowns to UC Davis, but they were competitive in that game. They beat Idaho State, which is a team that took Montana down to the wire last year. So, again, I don't think that Southern Utah is going to come to Washington Grizz and win. That hardly ever happens for anybody in the FCS. But I do think this is a very competitive conference game to get things started for Montana right out the gates. I think that people need to be aware that, I guess what I'm saying is I don't think this is going to be a 56-3. I think this will be a good exchange where this is a competitive football game, at least for a little while. Yeah,
I mean, there are some non-conference games where Montana State bring opponents in, and I don't have much to say about it. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a blowout. But then there are other ones too where I'm like Western Carolina. That was a couple of years ago. Even Furman in the playoffs, where those were the type of games where I'm like, okay, Montana's not going to lose, but it's going to be a battle. It's not going to be something where Grizz fans are comfortable by the second quarter. Like, all right, we got this one in the bag. I think the Southern Utah is not to that level as far as this matchup. I don't think it's going to be like as close as Furman. I mean, that was a 50-50 ball game. I think when Montana beat Western Carolina, that was a double-digit win, but it was kind of back and forth there for a little bit. But yeah, it's not going to be 56-3, but it might be, it might just be a 14-point ball game or something in the third quarter. Then, that kind of balloons to a 21-point win. But yeah, I mean, Southern Utah, they do a pretty decent job getting talent from the transfer portal. They recruit pretty well. They're usually going to be physical on the offensive line. They've had dynamites running backs emerged the last couple of seasons, and I really like their head coach Fitzgerald. He's really entertaining to talk to. He'll have them ready to go. They're not like super trick play heavy, but they might go for it on fourth down more than usual. They might try an onside kick. Like they'll throw everything at Montana, because why not? You're going to the number 2 team's place, season opener. Like just throw it all out there and see what happens.
Murder Hero Sports joining us here on Nuanez Now, ESPN Radio. I actually think that's the game of the week in the Big Sky, with the way that the conference season sort of somehow opens with the first games of the year here in this week 0. I think Idaho Cal Poly has some intrigue as well. Also interesting to see the betting line for Eastern Washington, Northern Arizona, because I think pundits would say NAU's a big favorite, but they're only 2.5-point favorites at home, which is interesting. That might be a line that is trying to bait the public into betting on an NAU team that I think people think is going to be pretty solid. But what matchups do you think exist in the Big Sky Conference here, Week 1, that you will be having an eye on, that you have some intrigue into?
Yeah, I'm really interested in that Eastern Washington, Northern Arizona one. Eastern might be a bit more solid than some people might think, but I do think that betting line is interesting, because I think Northern Arizona, especially with Ty Pennington coming back, I think they're due for a bounce back year. I thought it was a very big disappointment that they did not make the playoffs last year, and so I think that they're going to come back with a vengeance. And
especially with the way it ended, right? I mean,
yeah,
to lose by 3 touchdowns to Weber State when that Weber State team was dead in the water. They had an interim coach. I mean, that Weber State team had lost by 50 to Montana State a couple weeks earlier. Like, that was a bad way for that season to end. Like, NAU's got a lot to prove to me, because I thought that was one of those losses where it's like, how did that happen? That's a weird loss to have when you are sort of on the brink of a playoff berth.
Yeah, they made it easy on the playoff committee to just, after that performance, just cross them off. Like, no, this team's not getting in from the bubble. So it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the quarterback talent coming back, and you have I don't have to name all the names. Everyone knows all the names, especially in the state and at South Dakota State as well. But it's actually Ty Pennington right now. He's viewed as the top NFL draft prospect coming out of the FCS. He's on the Senior Bowl watch list, and so there are times where I can see it from him. There are other games where I'm like, I needed to see a bit more from Pennington, especially when it comes to playing highly ranked teams. So really interested in that game right there. And yeah, Idaho Cal Poly I think will be interesting, because Cal Poly, I know they have some academic things that sometimes can, I don't want to say hinder their recruiting, but maybe that is the best term. But I mean, beautiful location. Their new facility is phenomenal. It just seems like maybe that can be a program that is getting better. Can they be competitive with Idaho and push Idaho? And if they do win, I think the conversation, and I don't necessarily think that is going to happen, but if Cal Poly does win, it'll be interesting, the conversation, because it'll be, does that tell us more about Idaho, or does it tell us more about Cal Poly? That we'll see if we have that conversation or not, but that one might be a pretty intriguing game.
Sam Herder here on ESPN Radio. We'll take a quick break, because I just have 2 more questions for you, so I'll keep you around just for a minute. But we'll be right back right after this. Appreciate you for hanging out. We are coming to you live from the Grizzly Disposal studio here at the Missoula Broadcasting Company. Grizzly Disposal, locally owned, veteran-owned, the only Bears that should be in your garbage. More on the FCS Herd with Sam Herder right after this. Welcome back. 102.9 ESPN Radio. Colter Nuanez coming to you through the Grizzly Disposal studio. Grizzly Disposal has construction roll-off boxes for your construction project. Don't wait days or even weeks. Grizzly Disposal can get them to you within 24 hours. Give them a call if you need one right away, 406-541-7171, Grizzly Disposal. The only Bears that should be in your garbage. The FCS Herd with Sam Herder, Hero Sports, formerly of Hero Sports, I should say. I'm going to do that at least a couple more times.
All good.
Sam has been doing Hero Sports for the last 8 years, covering the FCS on a national level. He's now out on his own. If you missed anything in the first segment of this show, it will help you. You can go check it out on the podcast, and that'll help you get informed in Sam's new pursuits with his Patreon. He'll still be covering the FCS. He'll still be joining us during the 4 o'clock hour each Wednesday here on Nuanez Now. So, Sam, we talked about the Friday night game between Cal Poly and Idaho, and I think it's intriguing for Cal Poly because, first of all, they get to be on national TV. I think this is the first time that San Luis Obispo's been on ESPN. I'm not don't for sure quote me on that, but I think it's certainly one of the first times, if not the first time. A lot of pageantry, a lot of fanfare that's going to accompany the pregame, I'm sure, because they're going to have. I'm positive they'll have a package on the John Madden Center that just opened, which is like a $55 million football facility there at Cal Poly. And, again, like you said, last segment, having the academic stuff, Cal Poly is a really challenging academic school. It's a polytechnic school. It's one of the premier engineering schools in the country. But they've sort of used that as a crutch lately as why they've had a hard time recruiting. But I think it's fascinating because Cal Poly, as a triple option and flex defense team, made the playoffs a handful of times. I mean, they won the Big Sky in 2012. They made the playoffs multiple times, and I remember covering them when I was a very young sports writer. They came to Missoula and beat the Grizz at Washington Grizzly Stadium in the playoffs. So, I mean, they're a program that has had some rich tradition. They've had some great players go through there on both sides of the ball, but they haven't done anything since they changed over from the triple option. So I just wonder, like, with this opportunity and a new head coach and all these different factors, if this is a moment that Cal Poly can stand up and embrace, because it seems like a moment that hasn't come around that often over the last 10 years, but maybe this could be sort of a building block for them as a program.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge spotlight for them, and right on ESPN as well. And it will be interesting to see what type of viewers this gets. But I think people will, like you said, it probably is the first time they've had a football game on national television. So there might be some casual viewers, tuning in and being like, what is this place? What is this campus? And, it probably could help with, student recruitment as well and player recruitment. So it is a really big opportunity for Cal Poly, and really, you can flip it around to the other sideline as well. Like, this is a huge game for Idaho, because the Vandals have a very, very tough non-conference slate. If they lose this one, all of a sudden you're like, well, they're up against it already because of their non-conference slate. And after back-to-back years of making the quarterfinals under Jason Eck, last year they dipped back down. So like, what type of Idaho program are we going to see? Is it going to be the one that came to the FCS thinking they're going to run things and things just didn't go their way? Or is it going to be closer to the Jason Eck years where they have routinely been in the playoff mix and making decent playoff runs? So just really fascinated with this matchup on both sides.
I mean, on the Idaho note, I totally agree with you, because I think last year with Thomas Ford coming in and the fact that they had so many good players leave with Eck to go to New Mexico, combined with the fact that it was pretty obvious that there was some unrest on their coaching staff, especially on the offensive side, and that's why they cut ties with much of the offensive staff this last offseason. Those two factors, though, that only gives you a little bit of grace for a little bit of time. Eck got the momentum back in Idaho in a big way. So they can't lose that. Like another 4-8 year, and I'm not going to say you totally lost it, but you lost a lot of it. And so to avoid that, you have to win the games you're supposed to win, and this is a game you're supposed to win. So for Idaho, I think this is a massive game. Like you have to be able to take care of business against a Cal Poly team that's been towards the bottom of the league for the last handful of years. You have to. And I think you have to look good doing it too, right? I mean, they brought in a new offensive coordinator in Ian Shoemaker. He's supposed to be the guy that's going to get everything right in the world for Joshua Wood, reignite the offense, all that stuff. But you got to prove it, and that starts on Friday night. But I actually think, for as big as this is for Cal Poly, for the display of their university, I think it's a much bigger game for Idaho and getting off to a good start this year.
Yep, for sure. And I think Idaho offensive line, I think they should be pretty solid, but I want to see more out of Joshua Wood, and I do think a part of that is just the system that he's playing in, and under Shoemaker, what he did at Eastern Washington, the numbers they put up were just ridiculous. And so, can he bring that out of Joshua Wood? I think is going to be fascinating, because when he's healthy and he's rolling, he's very fun to watch. And I didn't have Wood very high on my overall returning quarterback rankings in the FCS, but I think he's maybe one guy that, if he puts it all together with this new offensive system, he's a guy that could go from, maybe not having preseason accolades to maybe he can get onto that like third team all Big Sky sort of list, because we know the first two spots are probably going to go to the guys in Montana.
I mean, Wood was a very decorated high school player. I mean, he's the Washington Gatorade Player of the Year coming out of high school. He was a guy that had some Pac-12 interest back when the Pac-12 was actually a thing. People forget this too. He was committed to Eastern Washington because he wanted to go play for Ian Shoemaker, and they thought he was Eric Barriere 2.0. And who knows how things go if Shoemaker stays at Eastern and then Wood goes to Eastern. Who knows how things go? Because the last good Eastern team was that 21 team when Barrier won the Peyton Award. And since Barrier walked out the door and since Shoemaker walked out the door, they haven't had a winning record since. So who knows how things go? But instead, Wood, of course, reroutes and goes to Fresno State, where he had almost no success to then middling success to then played well at the end of his Fresno State tenure. But then he ends up getting back to Idaho. So if Shoemaker could ignite Wood, that would certainly be a big key for the Vandals. Okay, last thing for you, FCS Herd with Sam Herder here on Nuanez Now. On the national landscape, are there any games that you'll really be keen on watching outside of these games in the Big Sky that we've already broken down?
Yeah, to me, honestly, the most interesting one is Prairie View A&M going to Tarleton State. Prairie View A&M was in the Celebration Bowl last year. I really like just where they're going as a program under head coach Tremaine Jackson. And then you have Tarleton State, who obviously is trying to move up the ladder, not only subdivision-wise, but also just in the FCS and trying to compete for a national title. So it's one of those games where, you have one team that is vying for a Celebration Bowl and another team that is vying for an FCS national championship. Especially when Deion Sanders was at Jackson State, there was a lot of social media discourse about what was better, winning the Celebration Bowl or competing in the FCS playoffs, and so that's just a really fun non-conference matchup right there. Monmouth and Tennessee Tech is another interesting one as well. I believe that's a preseason ranked game. One more as well that's maybe a bit off the radar. West Florida, who is the newest Division I program in the FCS, they've had a lot of D2 success. They're joining the UAC. They're hosting Southern Illinois, who is a preseason ranked team. For West Florida to get a pretty highly ranked team to come to their place in the season opener, I think is a really big deal. They have a great fan base, so I expect a really good crowd at West Florida. I don't think they're quite ready to knock off DJ Williams and Southern Illinois, but I could see a rocking environment for that one.
Well, as always, you can find Sam here on Nuanez Now on Wednesdays. We'll also have the Mondack football show for you coming out on Friday as well. And we'll get the Mondack into the rotation on Grizz Game Day Saturdays as well. And, of course, you can always find Sam's stuff on his own platforms as well. And we'll continue to help you get the word out there about that. But we appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you soon. But thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, always good to be on. Thank you.
Nuanez Now 102.9 ESPN Radio. We'll turn the page. We'll talk some Bobcat football. We'll hear from Justin Lamson on the other side. Stud quarterback for the Montana State Bobcats. Joins us next. Don't change that dial. Keep it right here. It's 102.9 ESPN Radio. Welcome back. 102.9 ESPN Radio. Let's dive into some Bobcat coverage. The defending national champs get their season kicked off in St. George, Utah on Saturday night. They moved the kick twice already. It's supposed to be 6 p.m. kick, then they moved it to 7. Now they moved it to 8. It's supposed to be 104 degrees in St. George on Saturday. Even at 8 o'clock, it's supposed to be in the mid-90s. So it's going to be hot, hot, hot. It's sweltering in the desert down there in St. George. So that certainly should play a factor. It's also an interesting field. Like, St. George is a sweet town. Utah Tech's field still has a long ways to go. I mean, it's a fine field, but like the lighting is a little bit weird. It's a little bit dark there. But the Cats have played down there before. They played down there a couple of years ago. I think 2023 they played down there. So this is not a completely foreign for some of the older guys. But Lamson's never played there. Taco Dowler was at the press conference, and he had some memories of playing down there. Caden Dowler was also at the press conference. He had some memories of playing down there. But I figured we would hear from Montana State's quarterback. We have a story up on Skyline Sports about Justin Lamson, but also he's obviously a pivotal figure in this whole thing. A guy who came in last year, and at this time last year, nobody knew what Montana State had in Justin Lamson. But by the end of the year, an all-conference player, an all-American player, the most outstanding player in the FCS National Championship game. And then coming into this year, widely regarded as one of the best players, period, in the Big Sky Conference. So he was certainly a big acquisition after transferring from Stanford ahead of last year. Here is some excerpts from Justin Lamson at the Montana State press conference.
I guess for both of you being first-time captains this year going into your final season, what did that mean to get that honor?
Yeah, no, for me it was honestly just probably the greatest honor or football accomplishment in my head to this point. I always tried to represent myself as a leader, but knowing that my teammates, consider me one of the leaders on the team, then now I got to go set the standard even higher, and I got to continue to do that. So for myself, I was super happy and definitely something I wanted. And, I think, the 5 other guys selected with me, are great representatives of our team. And it was really cool to be named captain, especially when the teammates are voting for it. It's pretty cool.
And Justin, last year you only had a fall camp. This year, you got the whole spring, summer, fall. Just how much more comfortable do you feel within this offense and with the chemistry with your wide receivers?
Yeah, especially with the receivers and tight ends and running backs. I think all those offensive guys, we've been able to create a bond. And like you said, like it's throughout the whole entire year. It's not just the spring ball and the fall camp. We get to hang out with each other outside of football, which is awesome. And I think this team is really close knit. So get to spend time with all those guys. And regarding the offense, my comfortability, I think Coach Sturbick's done a good job. I feel like he really, values my opinion on certain things, which some OCs would say, oh, it's my way or the highway. Obviously it's his choice at the end of the day, but he's gonna ask me what I like, and I feel like he knows where I'm at offensively right now, so he's gonna install certain things to get me right, and and I'm pretty open with him on what I like and don't like, so I think that's a positive relationship. But I'm still trying to take a step every day in the offense. You're never satisfied with it.
And then anything on film from a defensive perspective that could maybe pose some problems for the offense?
Yeah, well, I think schematically, I think they're very, very versatile with their fronts. They seem to have a lot of different blitz packages and getting different coverages. So, just being ready for all those different things. So I'm happy that, we've gotten to get a little head start on them. And, I feel like our coaches are putting us in the right place to this point, and we got to keep executing as a team. But, personnel-wise, I also feel like they return some talent as well. So, I think they're going to come out swinging, and, we got to be ready and play our best football, So, they're a good team, and looking forward to this Saturday.
Kind of for both of you guys, we've talked a little bit, you might have heard us with Caden mentioning the heat over in Utah, but also it's going to be kind of a later start. How is that going to affect kind of your preparation going into the game?
Yeah, I think regarding the heat, I think that's a mental thing at the end of the day. You just got to hydrate. Our coaches have done a good job preparing us for that heat. We're not oblivious to the fact of how hot it's going to be at kickoff, even that late. I think with the later start, as an older guy, we've kind of done the whole travel thing, so you just kind of set your routine, right? I love our schedule, how we do it on the road, especially for later games. It keeps our mind right, but also doesn't stress you out too much before the game. But it's just about having a process, and it's just about being ready for there's going to be some external factors, and you just got to handle those things.
And, what should fans, not just Montana State fans, but football fans, expect to see from the Bobcat offense on Saturday?
Yeah, we hope to be explosive. We hope to be diverse in our personnels, and we got a lot of new stuff coming. I think we're a disciplined team, and we're going to be a team that is about fundamentals and communicating with each other, and is going to be ready to go on Saturday.
I agree.
You're listening to Nuanez Now, 102.9 ESPN Radio. Justin Lamson, part of our Montana State Minute. It's probably presented in part by the Bobcat Collective. Bobcat Collective helping the NIL efforts at Montana State. If you'd like to learn more, visit bobcatcollective.com. More with Justin Lamson right now.
For Justin, I wanted to ask you about Parker Beatty. I know he's had a really outstanding offseason, and it seems like he's built a lot of trust with you guys. So what does that take it for a guy that's young like that to sort of make an impact on the offense so far?
Yeah, like we talked about him in the spring, he's an explosive dude. And I think we got a lot of guys like that, catch the ball and go make something happen. I'd confidently say we got 6 guys in that receiver room that could all be starters and go do something with the ball, you know what I mean? And maybe even more. So a guy like Parker, getting him some touches when we got a whole bunch of other weapons, it's part of the deal. You got so many weapons, that's a good thing. But, I'm very excited to see what he does. We had a scrimmage two weekends ago, and 4 catches for like 106 yards. That average is pretty good. So it's a dude that I really think, the future is super bright for him at Montana State. And I just continue to look forward to see what he does in the future.
Justin, the other individual guy I want to ask about was Aiden Kaplan. Where have you seen him progress, and how much security does that give you guys on the interior of the offensive line?
Yeah, he's doing great. I really feel confident when he's at center. I think he's starting to be more confident, where he's pointing and the calls he's making. And I do feel like the rest of the 4 guys on the offensive line respect what he's about. So I feel very confident going into week 1 that, Aiden's going to do his job throughout the season. I think he's just busted his ass the whole, off season and fall camp just to be right where he's at. He carries his weight really well, and I know Coach Smith really trusts him a lot. So, I feel really comfortable when he's at center. So I'm excited for him.
And for both you guys, Zach Cruz being named captain is an awesome part of his journey and his story. So what do you think made him worthy of being one of your guys' captains this year?
Yeah, met Zach about 1.5 years ago, and just respect everything he's about, just the way he handles, everything football related and outside football. He's a professional. Kind of like Taco said, I feel like everybody voted for him on a team. I think that was kind of a gimme. But when Zach Cruz walks in the room, you can kind of feel his presence a little bit. Just him and Caden, easily the 2 leaders of the defense. So love everything that guy's about, and I think he's very underrated, and the sky is the limit for him this year.
Appreciate Justin Lamson. Appreciate the Bobcat Collective. Fun Montana State Minute. We'll have another Montana State Minute featuring Taco Dowler on Colter Nuanez later on this week. And we'll have player interviews all season long here on ESPN Radio. Hour 1 the books. Hour 2 coming at you. A special ESPN Roundtable. Some trips down memory lane with our good friend Ryan Tutel, as well as some laughs and some life stories. That's our ESPN Roundtable. We'll also hear from Reese Brooks, a talented tight end transfer from Cal Poly. Really interesting tidbit in this interview. You're going to want to hear it. That's coming up about 5:30, our Grizz Star of the Week. We'll see you on the other side. Hour 2 coming your way. It's Nuanez Now, 102.9 ESPN Radio.